if you kind of see your crowdfunding event or any kind of operation as like it's something you're trying to conquer or to win, well, then it actually requires winning the hearts and minds of your backers.
Nobody cares about your thing as much as you. Do not make the mistake of assuming that everybody else that around you, as soon as they see it, are going to fall in love with the product like you are. You get further by winning their hearts and minds. Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined as always by Sean. And today we've got a very interesting topic for you. It's called the hearts and minds strategy used by basically the British Special Forces, SAS, and how that actually applies to running a board game publishing business. And really, honestly, well, I say board game publishing because that's one of the things that I'm doing. But I mean, I run a digital marketing agency. I run there are other, I have my hands into other pies as well. And I find this particular topic is very beneficial whenever you need to deal with people. You get further by winning their hearts and minds. And so Sean knows a lot about this topic, and kind of the details, the what is it, like the gory military version details. I don't know if they're gory, but they're very devious. I don't know. And so we'll get a little bit of background and then we'll dive in. But I just want to let you guys know first that there's a company out there called Tabletone that hooked us up, and they're sponsoring our podcast. And so we just want to say thank you to them. If you guys play RPGs, they're a pretty sweet soundboard for RPGs. So that said, let's dive in. Sean, explain to us, what is this hearts and minds strategy used by British SAS?
So some of you might know that I'm currently developing a board game called Cypherpunk, and essentially you are these partisans and you're kind of overthrowing this kind of surveillance regime. So I've been looking a lot at World War II history, and
I've got my merch on.
Yeah, we both have to wear the same shirt today. So I've been doing a lot of research.
We're crowdfunding dorks. Welcome to the Crowdfunding Dorks podcast.
Actually, I told her friends, like, hey, I'm making a board game about ciphers. Like, wow, it sounds really nerdy. So I've been looking at a lot of World War II history because I think my philosophy with game design is trying to put limitations on the mechanics, and one way you do that was with themes. So if I really want to nail the theme, so that whenever I get a suggestion of changing mechanics, it's always kind of filtered through the theme, so that it drives the story or the world that I'm seeking to create. So I've been doing a lot of reading, and one of the books I just finished reading, let me grab it off the shelf here behind me. Oh, where is it? Here it is. It is the sort of the complete history of the SAS. I'm sure it's not complete, but it's certainly a nice overview. So that I found it quite fascinating. For those who don't know, the SAS is the Special Air Service, which is kind of an ironic name because they originally started as paratroopers, but their first operation went so horribly that they abandoned. So they actually have nothing to do with air pretty much anymore. They do some drops, but they kind of became famous because they were a group of essentially crazy people who, during Operation Torch in World War II in the Northern Campaign, went behind the enemy lines on jeeps and did these hit and run raids. And they were very successful doing these hit and runs. So they would drive up and, just with machine guns, shoot planes as they were, parked, and blow up ammo dumps and things like that, and then just like run back into the desert. So they were very effective at doing this, and they could have built a name for themselves. But
there's actually a show called SAS Rogue Heroes. And the first season, I watched the first season, and it was pretty good overall. But it pretty much portrayed them exactly like you said.
Yeah.
The crazy people that were highly effective, like shooting planes with machine guns and disabling, German Nazi like warplanes.
Yeah,
that's what they
certainly had hoods. But in fact, even the way they were formed, it was irregular. The guy basically broke into like the military office and just invited himself in and got a meeting with one of the head people to kind of even create the organization. So it was even created in a way that was kind of obscure and strange. But anyway, after World War II, and and this is where the hearts and minds idea comes in. They then had campaigns in Malaysia, and they were fighting communists in the jungles there. And this was really their first time having kind of facing jungle guerrilla warfare. And how they overcame the communists was they attacked the supply lines of them hiding deep in the jungle. But then they also got the locals to side with them, because the locals were helping the communists. They were giving them ammo and food and supplies. And one reason that they were intimidated, the communists were, saying, hey, help us or we're going to shoot you and your family. So when they stepped in and they won the hearts and minds of the locals while also removing the supply routes, this took a long time. They eventually were able to weed out the threat from the jungle. So I thought, I kind of do this reading these kind of military history books, and it's like, actually that kind of applies to crowdfunding, where if you kind of see your crowdfunding event or any kind of operation as like it's something you're trying to conquer or to win, well, then it actually requires winning the hearts and minds of your backers, and it's really important that you get them to side with you. And so I thought it might be a good conversation to have on a podcast, even though it might come from a strange source.
That's awesome. Well, I enjoyed it, and I think that it's I think as you become an expert in one area, and this is what I find when you're making a product of any kind, when you start out with expertise in one area, and for you it's obscure, World War I, World War II history and other things like that. It's just kind of a passion of yours. And, also the gnarly things the CIA has done. Like, if ever I needed to ask somebody about a detail regarding MK Ultra or whatever, like, you would be the guy that I would ask. Or if I got a cryptic note, I'd be like, Sean, this could be a threat against my family. Would you please decipher this? I would definitely go to you. So, then you become interested or skilled in another area like crowdfunding or marketing and whatnot. You're able to kind of see the connections. And I think that is, it's a place that insight can come from. It's a new angle. Maybe we get the same information, but given to us in a new way. We're able to really see something new. So I personally think this type of thing is probably one of the more exciting discussions we could have. And so, but I want to, like, before we get into like application, I want to go and like clarify, because I don't understand as well as you do what the British SAS did. Like, for example, you mentioned they went into Malaysia, they were fighting against communists, and that's back when war had like clear sides. Like, I play for this side, you play for that side, and they're not like hiding among the people or whatever. It feels like war is more muddy nowadays, at least to like Western society. And so the British would go in. So the communists had the hearts and minds of the people at first, mainly like the bodies of the people, because they were threatening them with violence, right? They're threatening their families and whatnot. But they were also providing humanitarian aid, right? They were giving medicine, food, other things like that.
Yeah, possibly. I think another thing in the book, it calls them communists, but I think they were also nationalists. The idea they wanted to break away from the British Empire. So there was an element of that as well, where they happened to be communists. But I think maybe the thing that was driving their sort of commitments to do this after the war was maybe nationalism. They wanted to just not be part of the thumb of the British.
Okay. And then that's why the SAS came in there, and they were like, well, we need to write this or we're going to lose a chunk of our empire. So then they get in there, and they needed to replace that humanitarian aid to win the hearts and minds of the people. But then they had these blockades of, well, there are these bad guys that are entrenched in doing that right now. So they conducted like stealth operations of like defeating bad guys, like assassination, other things like that, and simultaneously replacing humanitarian aid. Like, oh, these British people are now giving us humanitarian aid. Is that kind of what was happening, like a two-pronged effort?
Yes. It's kind of wild because they had no real way of getting into the jungle apart from trekking, which could take days, or literally just parachuting in. So their goal was to hit a tree. That's basically, and then hopefully you don't die. So some people die dropping in. So, but that's basically okay, chaps, wow. Jump out the plane, try hit a tree. It's like, are we supposed to avoid trees? So it is pretty wild. But yes, I think essentially it was small groups of highly trained elite soldiers. The SAS are highly trained, that they have a very vigorous kind of vetting process to get through. So they're kind of like the top of the top in terms of world class soldiers, and they would be in small groups, usually between 4 and 6 people. And yes, they would go into the jungles, and usually there's one person who specializes in something. So someone might specialize in explosives, another person specializes in codes or communications, another one in tactics or whatever. So yes, they would do these, essentially find a trail, wait for the enemy to pass, and then ambush them. And that's kind of what they did and what they sort of mastered. And then it was finding clearings and then supplying those clearings with medicine, supplying those people with protection, with food or sustenance. So it was meeting their needs in a humanitarian way. It was a form of psychological operation, because the goal is to use, I suppose, psychology to win the hearts and minds of the people. But this was sort of formatted in Malaysia, and then they brought it to their other campaigns, such as Omar and other places. But it's but there's a lot to learn, because even the Art of War by Sun Tzu, this ancient Chinese document written by a general, how to defeat people in battle. There's a lot of principles there that apply to areas outside of warfare. It applies to business. It even applies to games. So when you're creating a game and there's maybe certain strategies, you can apply some of these things. And I think the more you know about maybe warfare and how it's done, you can incorporate some of those systems thematically into your games. I think they'll feel far more authentic and richer as a result, if you're able to actually have some type of reference to the real world. So that's essentially what I'm reading, this kind of more of game design, and how to create a world that at least feels, or it seems believable. I know that, for example, in Half-Life, the game developers at Valve, they all went away and studied how weapons work, because if you're firing a machine gun, how does it feel, or how does it sound like, and what does it look like? So I think that was necessary for them creating a game about firing weapons. You have to know how weapons work if you're going to create a video game where you're shooting aliens. So I kind of see it in the same light as that, where if I'm creating a game about guerrilla warfare, essentially I need to study guerrilla warfare. So it's been an interesting path, because I started with the Boer War, and they were the kind of the first implementation of hit and run, the Dutch, the Boers versus the British. And that's an interesting story in it of itself, because the British defeated the Boers, kind of similar how they did in Malaysia, which was cutting the supply lines. They basically culled a bunch of horses, because that was how the Boers were using horses to move across South Africa effectively, and they just started culling the horses, and then they had no means of transporting their supplies or themselves across the battlefield. But yeah, so I started there, and then I've moved on. I'm now sort of in World War II, and I'm also looking at kind of the Cold War as well. But I think there's a lot that can be learned from history into game design. So that's kind of why I'm doing this. But yeah, Hearts and Minds is something that I think applies crucially to crowdfunding, because at the end of the day, if you haven't won the hearts and minds of your email list or of your crowd before you fund, you're not funding. So it's kind of key that we sort of understand. So I suppose, how then do we bring the principle? We obviously aren't suggesting that you provide medical assistance or feed or protect people on your mailing list, but what are some of the things that people can do in order to win the hearts and minds? Or what are some of the things that you have done, Andrew, to win the hearts and minds of your email list in terms of deliverance?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, I think for myself, there's so a lot of people, when they become a personality, and I believe that if you're making a company and you're that sells a product, you should become a personality that leads the company, that is sort of the face of your company. A lot of people are introverted and don't want to lead a physical parade in person, but there are ways that even an introverted person can comfortably do this. Stonemaier Games, I always use them as an example, where Jamie Stegmaier gets on camera and talks about various things. His YouTube channel is very important to their company. And so I think the first thing is, I try to be myself. The version of me that you hear on this podcast is the same version of me that you would get at a convention. Probably a little crazier at a convention, honestly, than on the podcast. But I just am me. I'm not a when I say a caricature, what I mean is a lot of time people are more extreme versions of themselves when they're on. And what I mean by that is if they're at an event and they talk to someone, they're on, they're not able to just be themselves. That requires a lot of energy to do that, to be a caricature of yourself, a more extreme version of the truth. But when you can just be you, it's it's natural. You don't have to front. And I think that that's a very, very important piece of my personal brand or my personal strategy is I am myself. And I've given people the expectations of if I respond in a certain way, I have people that will say, "Oh yeah, that's just who he is," or that, and that kind of thing. So I think that's really, really important. Some people will not jive with that because they might not like my opinions, or they, we'll talk about opinions later and whatnot. But I feel like the important thing is that, or maybe they just find me boring or, uninteresting. And there's a lot of content out there to watch on YouTube. There's a lot of board game companies to follow. You don't have to follow my company, but if you do, and you kind of resonate with who I am, my presentation, what I have to say, what I care about, that will, you feel like it's more than just, when you buy a product from me, it's more than just a product, but you're supporting a person that you can find things in common with. And it's not just some corporate entity that is trying to make money off of you, but you feel like you are helping someone's family, that you're benefiting that person, that you're giving them more of a platform, that you're, it feels a little more personal. Like, hey, when I buy this product, I get to relate more to this person. And I found that is something that people really appreciate. They talk about me as though I am their friend. And for those listening to this podcast, I may have, like, you may have heard by, and let's say we talk eventually at a convention. We have at this point, like, what, 260 something episodes of our podcast out there. Some people have been listening to us for 5 years. And I remember, it was like, whatever, a year and a half ago, we went to Origins, and people were like, they would hear my voice and they would turn around and be like, "Dude, you're Andrew, aren't you?" Yeah. And I have never met that person before, but they've heard me. They've spent 250 hours with me, listening to my voice and what I have to say or whatever. Right. And you as well. And so it's one of those things that I have. I mean, it's a humbling thing for, when somebody talks to you in person as though you've known each other for a long time and they're excited to meet you and whatnot. But it's and I always try to just immediately, like, I cover that gap of, like, I have no idea who this person is and they're talking to me like they know me. Immediately my mind, my body, everything shifts to, like, I know this person and I like this person. I just have to figure out what their name is, and I got to figure out why I like them, and so the conversation is immediately friendly, and they, in a way, like, they have won my heart and my mind because they care so much about me or what I've had to say or what I've done, and that kind of thing. And so I think that there's, in the end, a reciprocal relationship builds when you become a very natural person. Just be you. Don't be anything more incredible or whatever. And because if you are, if you become a caricature of yourself, a more extreme version that talks more excited, that's blah 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 on the podcast, then you've got to maintain that, because that's what, if people spent 250 hours of me sounding like Cookie Monster on, on camera, then they're going to expect the Cookie Monster when they meet me. And when I can just be myself and take a deep breath and be like, all right, yeah, I'm an idiot too. And, here and there, and I'm normal. Right. It makes it very easy just to be me when I'm talking to that person. Right. Now I think that it's important, whatever. So there's a lot of people have this belief that people, if only you knew the real me, you wouldn't like me, and or you would just be unimpressed or whatever. I have to do something to make it feel like I am worth listening to or whatever. And I believe that it's mainly about the content that you create, or the things you are working on. That's what makes you amazing. So you could be a boring person and win my heart and my mind, because it's not just me that you're circling around thinking, wow, this guy's so amazing. It's really about what I'm doing. It's like the reason people listen to this podcast, I believe, is not because I'm so amazing. It's just because of the content of the podcast. And the same thing with my publishing company that made Deliverance, and we work on board games. They stick with our company because they really like the games that we make. And that's the one thing that they can kind of come around, regardless of political beliefs or religious affiliation or whatever. They can celebrate the thing that we're either working on or that we made together, and we're all on the same side, we're all on the same team, we're all moving in the same direction. And that's how some people tend to latch on that way. And so everything that I do in my communication, like my emails that I write, you get, I talk a lot, I'm wordy. And so my emails are long. And I've talked about this before, where some people, like Gabe Barrett, by contrast, he's a man of very few words, and his emails or his Kickstarter updates or GameFound updates, they tend to be pretty short, to the point, very direct. And that's him. Like, people like that about him, but that's because he's Gabe. He's just being himself. And he's not trying to be a caricature where he's got high energy. He needs to write lots of stuff. And that's unnatural for him. So if you met him in person, he would say like 2 words. And, that's just who he is. Right. He does have that accent though. That's his legit twang. He's got that Alabama twang. So hopefully that answered some of what you had asked.
Hey, crowdfunding nerds, if you're looking for an awesome fulfillment partner for US shipping, you should really consider Bridge Distribution and Fulfillment. I personally use them. I've used them for multiple projects. They do such a great job. They also can fulfill Amazon orders and get you prepped for Amazon and their warehousing team. I have been so happy using Bridge Distribution. I'm really proud that they're sponsoring us. If you reach out, bridgedist.com, that's bridgedist.com, let them know we sent you. All right, now back to the show.
Yeah, I think when we're thinking about winning the hearts and minds of your audience, I think it's about, as you said, about the product. But another way of saying that is, what am I giving to these people? So it's giving focused, not receiving focused. So one thing that I've done, because I've been doing a lot of play testing, as much as play testing as I can with Cypherpunk, but if there's someone who has contributed significantly or who's showed up to every play testing session, which there have been some folks, I've bought them merch. I've just bought them like a t-shirt, just to say, you got one, because you brought the team, the Learn Games team, in to review it, and it was very helpful. So I just want to say thanks. So I think it's little things like that where it's, hey, I appreciate what you've done. I'm giving back. And I send them some merch, and they've really appreciated that from so far. And it's still early days, but the people that have received stuff have been really thankful. And I think it's just even at this early stage where I'm still at the very beginning of playtesting, it's a way to say thank you, honor their time, and win their heart and mind, because I know at some stage that this person is going to back the crowdfunding campaign and probably throw a lot of money, because it's going to be an expensive product. And so I kind of want to recognize that and show my appreciation. So I think if you kind of get into the mindset of, how can I give to these people? What can I do to make them feel included, appreciated? Then that's going to help overall with relatability. There's always limit as well when you're doing it through digital means. So there's a limit to this. So you're not, I suppose, I think you can go too far where it's like, am I creating a cult? It's like, we've kind of talked about this where the tribal marketing can almost become like cult marketing. So I think that there's always a cutoff point. You have the, barriers and boundaries and things. But I think if you keep the overall kind of ethos in mind that whatever I do in this company is for the betterment of the people I'm trying to serve, I'm going to serve them with this product, and this is going to be something that's going to delight them, and I want to involve them. And the people who've contributed in a certain way, I'm going to recognize that and reward that behavior. Then I think you're on the good path to winning hearts and minds and getting people excited for your eventual crowdfunding project.
Yes, and I'll say that the T-shirts that you're putting together, it's definitely a man after my own heart, because I did T-shirts back in 2019, or was it 2018? It was very early on in the development of Deliverance. I offered a pre-order for T-shirts. Anybody that wanted to get a T-shirt, here's the design. It's a limited run. You'll have to pre-order the T-shirt, but then at a certain time, I'm gonna buy the shirts and ship them out by hand. And I ended up shipping out 200 shirts, over 200 shirts. I couldn't believe how many people wanted them. And I had at the time like 1,000 people on my email list. And so a fifth of my people bought T-shirts for a game that that wouldn't release until 4 years later or whatever. But they were like they were super excited about the game. And then when we ran our Kickstarter, everybody in 2021, everybody was like, the shirts were like 2 years old at that time, but everybody talked about them, wore them, and I made them really, really high quality. So people wanted to wear them more than once, right? Like, you send something through the wash that has a big heat press sticker on it, it gets all cracked up and doesn't look very good. And so I made mine like screen printed and as high quality material as I could, so that it was very comfortable. And 2 years later, people were like, I'm like, no, I'm not doing shirts. And they were like, yes, you are. And so I sold, oh gosh, I could be crazy. I think I sold
It became a problem.
900 shirts, 900 eventually, from that first campaign. And then of course this, the latest campaign in 2024 that we did, yes, we had 3 new designs that were voted on by the fans, and they all wanted them. And I've sold a grip of those things. And so it's, but it's kind of a, merch wise, that became a thing for us. I think that a lot of the time it's not naturally a thing for companies. They, and I generally would recommend against doing a bunch of T-shirts and everything for all your stuff, because, people, I don't know, you have to win the hearts and minds of the people before you sell a T-shirt. But the T-shirt certainly retains that loyalty, because they want to. People buy a T-shirt that as a statement nowadays, and it's a statement in support of something. Could be a joke, could be a cause, could be whatever. Even the plain T-shirts are a statement that, like Rage Against the Machine, I'm not going to do what you tell me, or I'm not going to support a cause. And that in and of itself is a message that they're giving, right? And or like non-branded T-shirt, just plain or whatever, or maybe even wearing a brand, right? Like my wife and I were talking about this the other day, like back when I was like a kid going through like junior high school, you wear Volcom, that means you're a skater. You wear Hurley, that means you're a surfer. And I mean, you wear Spy, that you're a snowboarder, and Roxy for a girl, that's like you're a beach girl, and other things like that, right? And so like people used to make statements with the brands they wear. And even nowadays, like, you shop at very expensive restaurant or expensive stores. I mean, that's like who you are is what you're wearing, right? And so in regard to T-shirts, I feel like it when it becomes a part of someone's identity, like that they advocate for you or for your company or product, then merch is a good idea. And early on, I think it can be very expensive to hand out shirts like that, but if you're able to do that, or even if you do that with like a few people, it could be something that like stokes fires. And I've got a Cypherpunk shirt regardless, whatever company you get to publish that, I'll back it just because. I don't even, even if I don't like the game, I would back it just because, yeah. So it was pretty mid, with like on the good side of mid. And when we played it, there were some really cool things about it, and I'm sure you're going to improve it a bunch. But I could definitely see one day publishing that, or but it just feels like it's going to become a game that's really good. So, but anyway, back to, I guess, the whole hearts and minds. I think one other thing, we talked about like merch and selling stuff, but I think the majority of what you do to win hearts and minds is in the word discipline. Maybe another word is consistency, because one of the other things, so think about what you like from a games company. And by the way, I'll mention, you're not going to win the hearts and minds of every single person. I think that different people are at unique situations in their life, and they don't have, I use the example of Lego connectors, where, imagine like a little Lego brick. It's got 8 little connectors on the top, and then we'll say 8 little connect spots on the bottom for connection. And then once that Lego brick is fully connected, it has no additional space for connection. And people are like that, where they just don't have the capacity to care enough about your product to become a raving fan. That's just, they'll buy the game, they'll play it a couple of times, it was good, but their favorite game is something different, and you're not going to change that. It's just, that's just the way it is, and that's okay, because people are at different stages. There are people are open-minded at different times in their life, or maybe they don't have their thing yet or whatever, but there are a lot of people that do. And so you're going to get, certain people can never truly become hardcore raving fans of a company because they've got stuff in their life that they care much more about. They'll become hardcore raving fans of something else, of some maybe a different type of industry or whatever. Like maybe they're a hardcore fan of Starbucks coffee, but they're just like, they have 400 board games on their shelf, and you're just another one, and I don't know. It's just some people don't have capacity to become that, but you can get a group of people hardcore that really excites your player base and energizes your player base. And, you've got like ranges of fans, you've got like, if it were a Target, the center is like your hardcore fans that will follow, that will drive 3 hours to see you, or fly to a convention because you said you were going to be there, or put it on their calendar for the next year because you were there last year. Maybe you'll be there next year. I'm buying a ticket. I'm booking the days. I'm asking, my work for vacation on those days a year in advance, and I have some people like that. Then there are other people that are like, if I happen to be in the area, like if I'm at Origins and I'm going there anyway, and the Deliverance booth is there, well, yeah, I'm gonna show up. Or the Crowdfunding Nerds booth is there, yeah, I'm gonna show up. Because I'm going there anyway, I'm just gonna mark it and be like, all right, on Saturday at noon, like, we're gonna stop by the Crowdfunding Nerds booth. It's just a thing we're gonna do. And then those people, they're very excited. They could be hardcore fans, but they're not motivated to see you just because. It's there needs to be a little convenience in there. And then there are other people that will follow you on social media, but that's really all they do. Maybe they lurk, maybe they comment, but that's really the interaction you get out of them. I have someone that answers every single question on our Discord and has played our game like only a handful of times, but they love the idea of the game. It's funny. So just kind of keep that in mind. But what I was originally saying was that a lot of the things you do, discipline and communication, and these regular things, routine, like ongoing consistent communication, is very, very important. And what I said before was like, think about what you like, what you appreciate from other companies. One of the things that I found that I appreciated from other companies was, tell me, just if I back a game on Kickstarter or GameFound, tell me what's going on. Even if there's no news, tell me that. But tell me that on a consistent basis. Good news, bad news, no news. Just tell me how it is, and I just want to be kind of updated, because we know, like, things at crowdfunding, they never go perfectly. you try to do your best, and then you find, oh, the manufacturer is taking a longer time. Like for us, the manufacturer, I think we're going to add like a month to our manufacturing because it's taking a long time to get the files right and other things like that. It's also taking me longer than I thought to to do the final editing pass on our story. And that's just kind of the way it is. And I wish I knew that making 400 pages of books is probably going to take a while. I don't know why I didn't plan on things like that. But I did give a buffer for our time, and maybe it delays us by 1 month, in the end, even though it was a lot more work than I thought or whatever. But the point is that I need to communicate whatever's happening to people, because one of the things that I, using Deliverance as an example, because it's a game we're trying to fulfill right now, I deal with that game every day. And there are so many conversations that I have about it. There are so many tasks of, work-wise that I have completed and things that I do that I don't talk about. But I have actually talked about those things every single day. I just have not shared those things publicly, unless there's a Kickstarter update or an email or maybe a Facebook post or like a Discord message, which very limited numbers of people in our, fan base, which is over 10,000 people. They only a few of them might read Discord or Facebook or whatever. Unless I share on Kickstarter or the email, then people are just not going to know all the things that happen. And when they don't know anything that's happening, they expect that nothing's happening. And so it's so important that you set your audience's expectations and, for your communication, and you do communicate. And I can give a number of examples of that, but it's, I'll pause there and, give you time for commentary.
Yeah, one thing about, in terms of, you're saying that people only have limited capacity to care about your thing. I also think that people interests wane and they ebb and flow. So there might be a period where they are really into your project, and then they kind of cool down. They might come back, they might not. And then there's the reversal of that as well. It's kind of like bands. I think people have always said, "Oh, this is my favorite band for the moment." And then maybe in a year or 2 years' time, your kind of interest in that band wanes, and you've moved on to a different style of music or something. So it's probably quite similar in that regard, where you have people wearing merchandise for bands. It's because they want to support the band, but they also want to associate with that style of music, or what the messaging that band is communicating. And I think, going back to the merchandising as well, just very quickly, the other advantage is that when you do use merchandise to delight fans, they become walking billboards for your game, right? They're walking around, and this is kind of taken from George Lucas, where he took the licensing rights of manufacturing and creating products, and this is essentially what he did. Was he created walking billboards for Star Wars, and that was very successful for him. So I think it's something that the board game industry could probably leverage more, is merchandising. And we might see more of this happen, but it's something that I'm thinking about, and it's something that you've thought about. I think something that you as a listener should think about for your game. Is there a way to use merchandise to delight fans, to promote your game, but then also to increase order value? That's something that becomes very important when you are in the e-commerce stage, where you're not just trying to sell your game, you're trying to sell larger order values, because that means your cost per click and your cost per acquisition, that starts to make sense once you cross a threshold of a sort of minimum order value that you can achieve. And you want to give options where someone can purchase something with $30 to $200. You kind of want that range where people can kind of fall in where they want. And merchandising is a great way to bundle, because you can say you'll get the game, you'll get the hat, you'll get the mouse pad, you'll get the shirt, and you'll get the deluxe components all for this bundle price. And that's going to really drive up your order value and give your company some longevity in terms of stability. So that's also important. So those are the kind of 3 areas around merchandising. But those are my kind of initial thoughts and some of the things you brought up.
I will give kind of a caution about merchandise, which is that there's a term that you can use for merchandising, which is called tchotchkes. Tchotchkes are little, I'll call them useless bits of material that you could keep or throw away. Like, for example, I have these things in front of me that I'll share. They are kind of cool if you're watching on video. They're these dice that I got from Longpack Entertainment or Longpack Games, my manufacturer, and they're like Christmas themed D12s, D10, and D4 dice, and they're tchotchkes. They sit on my desk. They're kind of fun. My kids want to play with them, and I thought that was a nice gift. And one day they'll get thrown away because they're oversized, and they, I only have 3 of them of that kind, and so they're not really important to me. I certainly wouldn't buy them if I saw them on a shelf. I wouldn't be like, oh, I need those. So I've seen companies go overboard with this, where they have far more SKUs of tchotchkes than they do actual products that people have the capacity to care about. Yeah. So, like you had mentioned, like Cypherpunk, I got a mouse pad and a t-shirt, which is awesome. But if, but the mouse pad, as an example, is that something that you want to stock 1,000 of in a warehouse and try to sell? Or is that, which I think that's maybe potentially going too far. But giving the ability for like a limited edition, limited time, offer of, you get a free mouse pad with the all-in. It adds extra value. It does add extra value. It's like, well, I wasn't looking for a Cypherpunk mouse pad, but because it was already included in the all-in, and I want all the gameplay content and some of those premium upgrades, I'll take a mouse pad. It's not like I'm not gonna if you put a mouse pad in the all-in, it's gonna hurt my opinion of the all-in. Not true. Unless the mouse pad is $30 and you increase the price of the all-in accordingly, there's just more value. And so a customer that is already in a state of, yes, I want to support this product, I want to have this on my shelf, I want to play it or whatever, they'll be like, yeah, I will take the merch too. That's why a lot of companies, when they go to events like Gen Con and Origins and PAX Unplugged and other things like that, will bring things that are giveaways, and because people appreciate that. So definitely something to think about.
I think the best time to sell dice, role-playing game dice, is
when
you're selling the core book. So people don't tend to buy dice by themselves. Particularly if it's themed like the core book, it's the best thing to do is to sell it with the core book as a bundle. And we've seen this a lot in terms of e-commerce sales. When you bundle core book and dice, you sell a lot more dice. So I do agree that you have to think as well, what's the demand and warehousing, how you're going to do this. Currently, this is just print on demand, and it's just more so a test to see what does this look like, and is it even feasible. So that's another part of my experimentation just with merchandising. But no, I think that's a completely valid point. You don't want to be sitting on a stack of merchandise which you can't sell because people only buy it in conjunction with another item. So yeah, people aren't going to buy a mouse pad, but if it enhances the value of a bundle, then you can add it to that. And I think there's other ways of doing this as well. One thing I'm almost thinking about, I think a lot more publishers should do this, is provide a design diary. And this could just be a digital document, like a PDF that's designed well, and it gives you behind the scenes of how the game was developed and your thought process, the inspirations, pictures and art and work in progress. I think that's a great thing to sell for $5. That I think people will just, oh great, I'll add that to my bundle. And they're probably not going to buy that by themselves, but when they're in the process of checking out the game with the all-in package, adding an extra $5 is like, sure, for this design document. So again, it's all these little ways of trying to increase the order value, also to try to delight fans. But yeah, I certainly think that whatever you do should be very intentional. But merchandising, again, I think in your case is doing lots of shirts. I know you polled your community to make sure that this is what they actually wanted. You didn't just go and produce a bunch of shirts. It's like, I hope they sell. So I think it's the same with that type of development of merch. You want to kind of go slowly and just make sure that probably limit. I'd say start simple, limit it with like just your logo or something, the game art on the front and something like that. Then go from there.
This episode is brought to you by Hero Time Manufacturing. That is Hero Time, the numeral 1.com. Hirschgleck has been a regular on our podcast. We highly recommend his services. He is a man of integrity. Hero Time, they can make anything. They've got competitive pricing, and they even do game prototypes. So make sure to check out Hero Time, numeral1.com. A link is in the show notes. And if you use the code crowdfundingnerds101, you can get a 3% discount on your production through them. Let's get back into the episode.
It's a lot cheaper to put together an image with a t-shirt, and like your proposed design and get feedback on that than it is to print that thing and assume it's going to sell. I have there are people that we've dealt with that have been, like me, they have a highly thematic game that they have been working on for a long time. It's got like a whole lore behind the world and everything. They, I've had children's games where people are this way. I've had, other games that are kind of like 30-minute, relatively quick games, but have this massive lore base behind them. And of course, games that are big like Deliverance, you've got like the whole lore base behind it. The people that are working on these games that develop lore like that, they're super passionate about these things. It's like they all, including myself, think, man, this game one day it's going to get like a Netflix special or whatever, like it's going to get an Amazon series that does well. It's going to get movies, and it just, all people have to do is know about the intellectual property, see it as successful as I see it is going to be, and then they'll jump on board. And that's a very dangerous place to be as a creator, because, so let me caution those people that are like that. Nobody cares about your thing as much as you, except for your mom probably, but nobody cares as much as you. Nobody sees the potential as much as you. And so when you are making this thing, do not make the mistake of assuming that everybody else that around you, as soon as they see it, are going to fall in love with the product like you are. And there are a lot of people that will make mistakes based on that assumption. They'll think, oh, I need to share a lot about the lore. And in actuality, like when you think about it, Magic the Gathering is a really, a massive, probably the biggest board game, card game type thing on the planet that I can think of, at least. And it has flavor text on cards, and they have novels and other things like that. Only 10% of Magic the Gathering's player base, according to Wizards of the Coast or Mark Rosewater, only about 10% of their people care about the story. But they care very much about the story. Like that is the main reason that they're in, right? Is because of the story, and they know the characters, and, oh, a card came out with this character that I know, and that matters a lot. Now, there are other people like me where I play the game to play the actual game. So the mechanics of the game are important to me. But, if my opponent gets up and has to use the restroom, then I'm going to look at the cards in my hand. I'm going to read the flavor text. I'm going to look at the pictures. I'm going to appreciate it. And I have even purchased books and read through the books and like, yeah, these are really good. And it's like fun, but not, just because I at the time was very into Magic, it's just not the reason that I'm playing it. So don't make the mistake of like getting too deep into the weeds of one particular area and force feeding it down people's throats, because they're not gonna be excited about that. Even though you want them to be. And that's like, so anyway, I also want to mention, I talked earlier about tangible things that you can do that people will, I talked about consistency and whatnot. I'd like to revisit that and just give a few like practical tips for winning the hearts and minds of people. Just do what you say you're going to do. Like that doesn't cost, that should, it might cost something. In fact, it might even hurt you to do what you say you're going to do. It might cost you more than you expected. It might, I talk about every once in a while, like in Deliverance, I made a last stretch goal for our first Deliverance campaign that ended up costing me like $10,000. It was not smart of me to do, but I filled that thing. It caused confusion afterward. It's like, you know what? I promised that I would do that. And so if I didn't, then people would look and say, you said you would do something that you failed to do. I never want somebody to say that about my company. I always want people to say, he said he was going to do this and he did. That's very important. Your word is your bond. The next thing is communication. Like when you write a Kickstarter update, you tell me what happened. I mentioned the good, the bad, and the ugly, or the nothing. If nothing is going on, just tell me that and give me a little bit about the game, something that I can chew on for a while. But very importantly, tell me when I can expect your next update, your next correspondence. In fact, I have done this. I told people, like, ever since our first Kickstarter campaign in 2021, I have given an update. So I told people that I would give an update on the last day of every single month. So it's very important for me to get a post out on the last day of the month, because that is the time that I told people I would. So everybody expects that I put a post out on the last day of the month. And for ever since our very first Kickstarter campaign in 2021 over the summer, that was the expectation that I set. And I have diligently worked to get a post out every single day, that the final day of every month, without fail. Even if it's like, oh, the last day of the month is December 31st. This is New Year's Eve. I'm not ready to like post something amazing right now. I need more time. I will post on Kickstarter on December 31st saying, the post is coming out on the 7th of January. Just so you guys know, I wanted to communicate with you guys today, because it's my vow to make this happen. And it just sets expectations. Nope. I have like maybe by the end of the month, I have maybe one or two people that have requested an update from me on Kickstarter. And even those two people, they know that it's coming on the last day of the month. I've worked for 5 years to make that an expectation. And by doing that, it shows that, there are people that will say, I'll back whatever product you make, because the first product was great. And then the second, and then your communication has been solid. You tell us what's going on. I never have to wonder where it is in production, where, if I'm going to get my game or not. And, it's mainly about when and what you're going through. And I believe what you say, because you've delivered a product already and that kind of thing. So your history becomes the reason that people will support you in the future. So what you're working on, even though, when I ran my first Kickstarter, I was like trying to do my very best, but there were people that valid point, like, this guy's never delivered before. So how do I know he's going to deliver this one? He says everything is good. He says he's working, but how do I know? Now people know that I've delivered one. They're like, this guy communicated diligently. He told us about what was happening. That, if something was wrong, we knew about it and we knew why there was a delay or whatever, but we got our product and we were updated the whole way. So now when I say, hey, people, this is the good, the bad, and the ugly, people are much more likely to credit me with, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. He's not, a shyster that's taking our money and unable to deliver. And I'm building that reputation.
And you really see that in your ads, because I know we're running ads currently for the Lay Pledge, and you'll sometimes get trolls in the comments, because of the name, referencing the film or whatever. And nearly always there's someone vouching for the game. There's a fan, someone who's got the game. It's really great to see that just organically through running the ads, people come across the ads, they are jumping in the comments and saying how much they love the game. And I think that this is evidence that the hearts and minds of these people have been captured. They really enjoy the product, they love the game, and they want to tell other people about it.
Yeah, I think that the actual quality of the product matters greatly. Like my ability, my capacity to care. If the game is not that good, if it's like average, I just can't become a raving fan of something that's not great, right? And so I think that part of what you do to win hearts and minds of people is you work diligently on your thing until it's the best version of what it can be, and it's something that is hard as a game designer, because I feel like a game is never truly finished. It's just like printed and, you'll find typos and other things like that afterward, even if you've been super duper diligent. But if the game is good, then you give people the capacity to care. So maybe it'd be a good idea to address, there are some things in the board game industry that have come up that I feel like, in regard to hearts and minds, that just maybe are landmines people can step on when you've developed a platform, when you've developed a, like for me, I'm a board game publisher, I'm a crowdfunding guy. You want to listen to me, and both of us really, because we are experts in crowdfunding. We're telling you what's happening. We're telling you like what we're doing and what we're actively doing on a regular, weekly basis to help our clients succeed. And like, there's a reason that we're covering this topic. It's because people need to hear it. And so if I were to talk about politics, then that's, maybe you agree with my political views, but that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about crowdfunding and to get marketing advice and whatever. So let me give you some marketing advice. Stay in your lane. How about that? People follow you. Yeah, sure. We might get unsubscribers if I share my political leanings and comment on political events of the day. But just remember why your people are following you. It's because of what you're doing. If everybody feels like they are walking in the same direction, you're leading the parade, but not from far away, like you're right with everybody else marching, and with your game that everybody loves, right? You're creating a community, a tribe of people that are like-minded. They have varying political views. They have varying, all sorts of views. And if you make the community about you and you share what's on your mind, you could potentially corrupt what you've built by or polarize what you've built. It's like a magnet, it attracts some things, it repels others. And I think that it's very important to realize when you have established a community, you will harm your community if you make it about, if you start sharing things that are not why we're here, and we had this happen. Alex Radcliffe posted a video about very, very unfortunate situation in Minnesota. ICE is a organization of immigration and customs enforcement, and they're causing all sorts of chaos in Minnesota that is being recorded, and there are people who have been killed by ICE agents. And Alex Radcliffe made commentary about this, and I like Alex Radcliffe's content, but that's not why I go there. I actually personally do a lot to avoid national politics. I really purposefully focus on my local community and what I can personally influence and that kind of thing. But I was like, man, it just feels like there's a board game review, and then there's like a game found update, and then there's like ICE is killing people. And it's like, that's not why I'm there. Not that the issue doesn't matter, not that it's not important, not that it doesn't deserve to be discussed, but really on that channel,
I actually have a real life example of this. You're probably quite familiar if you've played World of Warcraft. You're familiar with a chap called Athene. Athene Wins. He was from Belgium, and
you're pro or you noob. That's
yes. Athene Wins, and it was basically a satire of the World of Warcraft elite gaming community, which were these highly competitive, obnoxious, very irritating types of people on the internet. And he kind of embodied this caricature called Athene. Now, he got a large following doing this, but what he started to do is that he started to shift his messaging more towards political messaging. And at first it was like, okay, I understand it was about like internet censorship or whatever, but it kept on going. And eventually he changed his whole brand over basically to politics, and it didn't sit well with a lot of people because he tried to bring this caricature of this gaming elitist into other areas. It just doesn't work because it's a caricature, it's not real life. And he lost his audience, and he just kind of all dissipated. But I think that was an example of how people went there to laugh because he was mocking an online community and he was embodying a culture. And then he started to change gears and make this about something about the real world. The people weren't going to him people didn't care about his political views. They went there to laugh because he was a comedian. So I think that's an example of how this can kind of pan out over time. So I think that's just one example of that, where I think if people are going to you for one thing, then kind of stick to that. And I think that's important. Everyone. I think there's another part of me is like, is the internet even a great place to share these types of things? I really feel like so much of the political discourse on the internet is intentionally inflammatory, because that's how a lot of the internet is monetized. It's basically through rage bait. How can I get the most emotional reactions in order to get the most amount of traffic to tell people about my sponsor? Is essentially what's happening. So I don't even think the internet is like a great avenue in order to have these kind of delicate conversations. It's probably best left face to face anyway. So that's something to be aware of as well. I think there's a tendency maybe to use the internet for a purpose which is not really suited for, kind of these kind of deeper, more philosophical, heartfelt conversations. I think there's other uses for it. So then that can be a challenge. And unfortunately, I think how a lot of social media is orientated, it kind of bombards you with a lot of rage bait. Essentially, Twitter is ragebait.com. Everyone there is just trying to annoy people and get people on their side or against them. And it's essentially what that website has become. And I think it's best avoided, to be honest. I don't think you're going to find anything meaningful. Just ask, whenever you're sort of looking at something on the internet, always ask, is there a better use of my time? Is this building me up, or is it tearing me down? Is it helping me do something productive, or is it just wasting my time? And I think most often than not, you're going to walk away from the casino that is social media and say, I've wasted my time and money. I should have been doing something else. So that maybe is my overall advice to any kind of the temptation to use the internet for like a political messaging. But yeah, I think the bait and switch is not going to work too well. And there's a time and place, certainly.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I will also say that I've seen others like, for example, Cards Against Humanity, hilarious game that is super depraved and no one should play it, but it's very funny. So just tongue-in-cheek joke. I have jokes. So, but I remember back in like sometime in Trump's first presidency, they were like, we bought a section of land on the border and we're going to prevent Trump from building a wall on that section of the land. And so, it's when Trump's border wall, and, everyone was like very up in arms about that. And they actually bought a section of land and said, we're not letting Trump build his wall. And they released a set of cards that was specific to that particular project. It's like, if you buy this set of cards, then you're supporting us doing this particular thing. And it was a very political message. And I thought, man, like, I know liberal people and conservative people, they both love Cards Against Humanity. It's at like Walmart, and what they're doing is they're just polarizing their audience. I don't think that's why people buy or play Cards Against Humanity, but they feel like they're in a place now. I have a platform, I have a voice, we have an audience that will listen to what we have to say. And I just think that, yeah, you're co-opting an audience that follows you for something and then trying to shove a message down their throats. Actors do it all the time, and I have very little respect for actors that do that, because they don't live in the real world. They're not living there, But I think that it's just something that when people achieve a certain level of success, everybody deals with growing pains, myself included. I've dealt with growing pains with success. I've made mistakes feeling like, I'm making more money now. I walk around all high and mighty. And then, those, as they said, the saying goes, those who live in glass houses should not throw stones. A lot of people feel much more secure when they achieve a level of success, that they begin now to act like they're kind of like they've made it,
or untouchable.
I actually look back to like 50 Cent and Eminem. If you look at the way that they used to dress, 50 Cent, famous rapper, 50 Cent, when he was worth $100,000, had gold chains everywhere, and like he was all like blinged out. And when he's worth like, $300 million, he walks around in like a white t-shirt and sweatpants. Eminem, same thing. I remember Eminem going to like the VMAs, the Video Music Awards, with like a white t-shirt and just sweatpants, and people were like low-key kind of making fun of him. But Eminem is a scary human, and you evidently don't make fun of Eminem.
It's the stare.
He'll burn your house down. I don't know, but yeah, it's something that people will act differently when they've truly made it. And I think money reveals character. It doesn't create character. It just reveals what's there. It causes more of a light to shine on the character you have, so just kind of keep that in mind as you develop success, because, hey, I've made $2 million from Deliverance, and a lot of people would say that's very successful. And they're right to a certain degree, but it's like a drop in the bucket compared to, a game like Root, which tripled the staff of I forget what company off the top of my head, Leader Games. And I would like to have a game that's that successful, but it comes in waves. If Deliverance makes $20 million or $120 million, maybe I would act differently. But what I encourage you to strive for, as well as myself, is to be you now when you're poor, and when when you're rich, or when you're successful, or whatever that looks like for you. I want the same person. I want to talk to the same exact person who holds the same exact views, who has the same exact, when I make enough money that I don't need to do this podcast, that I could just do whatever I want, I would like to continue doing it, just because it's very helpful to a lot of people. And that was the original intent of this podcast, is just that it would help people who couldn't afford our services, so keep that in mind. It's about time to wrap up, so let's do it. But I don't know if you have any final thoughts, Sean.
Yeah, it's just maybe second, the idea of humility is important. But then another thing is, the corporation doesn't care. I think whenever I see a corporation standing behind a political cause, I'm like, you don't actually care. You're just doing this because it's a public relations stunt. And I think a great example of this is Coca-Cola. So during World War II, Coca-Cola had plants in Germany. And then World War II happened. And like, oh no, what do we do? It's like, well, instead of closing their plants, they just rebranded. So they created Fanta. And Fanta was just Coca-Cola in Germany for Nazis. And so during the war, they were profiting from the Allies providing them Fanta, and they were also providing Fanta to the Nazis in Germany. And then over time, they eventually added the orange flavor. But Fanta was created by the Coca-Cola Corporation to basically fund both sides of the war, to profit from both sides of the war. And they just changed the name because they kind of want to distance themselves from Coke. So, Coca-Cola didn't care who won World War II. They're a corporation. The only thing they care about is making money. And whenever I see, kind of corporations, especially these big kind of global behemoths of corporations making any type of political stance, I just instantly, I find it disingenuous. And we all kind of know why you're here, corporations. So trying to, pull the wool over our eyes. So I think be careful as a business, as a corporation, trying to make political statements, because at the end of the day, you're kind of the wrong lane there, and I think it does come across as disingenuous.
I will counter that with this: is that if you're a hyper political person and that's who you are, even if you disagree 100% with or if I disagree with your political views, if I know that that's who you are and that's what I'm buying into, and yes, I know you're completely crazy, opposite political views of me, opposite religious views of me, whatever, but that's who you are right from the very beginning. As you develop, then if I'm watching your content, then I know that about you, and I accept that about you. But what we're saying is, don't bait and switch me when you're this magnanimous person, all things to all people, and then now that you achieve a level of success, you become this crazy, racist, whatever person, or, it's just obviously, that's a pretty extreme. I hope nobody ever does that. But yeah, it's just be you, and don't bait and switch me.
Win hearts and minds.
So, yeah, win the hearts and minds. So, okay, we're going to wrap up. See you next time, nerds.
Tabletone is a phenomenal app. I use it every time I play tabletop role-playing games with my family. It greatly enhances the immersive experience. In fact, it's night and day using it and not using it. It can also be used for board games or any card game. It's great background music. It's made by a company based in Austria who have their own studio, who have developed their own software specifically to cater to your specific needs within the different game settings. So you can control intensity, there's different background noises. You can get it for free, and there's also a trial that you can run for 2 weeks that will give you full access to their entire catalog of sounds and audio. Definitely check it out. Link is in the description. Visit tabletone.app for more details.